Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to what I am now officially dubbing Deathcore Weekend 2022. Why is that, you ask? Well, it is because a slew of hot, young, ambitious deathcore bands are dropping new music this fucking weekend. And since January is usually pretty slow and there's not a whole ton of other music really grabbing my attention right now, fuck it, I guess we are exclusively talking about deathcore for the next 4 to 5 days. Like I said, Deathcore Weekend 2022. And let's officially kickstart the aptly titled Deathcore Weekend 2022 with Oh What the Future Holds, the 6th studio album from American deathcore crew Fit For An Autopsy. Fit For An Autopsy have almost inarguably been one of the heaviest and most brutal bands in the genre since they formed in the early 2000s, but starting with 2017's The Great Collapse, they have also become one of the genre's most progressive bands, both musically and literally. And as the band have continued to mature and grow and evolve, so too has their sound. The songs have gotten a lot more complex musically, pulling heavy influence from progressive metal, namely Gojira. The lyrics are more introspective, dealing with mental health and more personal issues, but they're also a lot more proactive. They are environmentally conscious and actively engaged with global politics. And the overall production value just keeps getting better and better. There is so much money, so much time, so much hard work being visibly put into Fit For An Autopsy's sound and image at this fucking point that attempting to argue otherwise is downright fucking stupid. Couple all of this information with the fact that this album was written, recorded, produced, and released in some truly dystopian times, and it's not unreasonable or irrational to assume that Oh What the Future Holds could very well be Fit For An Autopsy's most ambitious and provocative album to date. At the very least, it is their most anticipated album to date. While I did not include it on my top 10 most anticipated albums of 2022 list, a lot of y'all did, and a lot of y'all even seemed upset that I did not include it on my list. Which means that what I'm about to say might be a little bit difficult for some of y'all to process. And even more difficult for me to say, so a little liquid confidence. This album's just kind of decent. Now, before you light your torches and sharpen your pitchforks, let me make something brutally fucking clear. Fit For An Autopsy is still probably one of the best deathcore bands in the fucking game right now. Quite frankly, even at its absolute worst, this album is way tastier and way more nutritious than what your typical deathcore band normally serves up. But ultimately, and despite my best efforts, none of this material is resonating with me the way that records like Hellbound and The Great Collapse did in the past. The record is somewhat stagnant, somewhat repetitive. At this point, Fit For An Autopsy have been around long enough that they do have a bit of a formula, and they very rarely stray from that formula on this album. As a result, Oh What the Future Holds also feels kind of predictable, to the point where I can pretty much summarize this entire album as if Gojira made a deathcore record. There are indeed some twists, some turns, some extra special spices and hidden flavors to be found across this album. Two Towers, for instance, is without question one of the biggest and most epic pieces that Fit For An Autopsy have ever composed and delivered. It's very introspective, yet very oppressive, filled with, no pun intended, towering walls of crippling, groove-laden riffs, complemented by some very eerie, Deftones-style melodies. There's also a higher level of hate, which pairs some bouncy and rambunctious grooves with extreme technical precision. For a while, the vocals match up so perfectly with some of the instrumentation that it almost brings to mind the machine gun assault of a band like Archspire. And quite frankly, what some tracks may lack in creativity and ingenuity, they make up for in muscle and sheer fucking aggression. Conditional healing, for instance, is probably one of the most outrageous and pissed off things that Fit for an Autopsy has ever conceived. Like, I unironically added this song to my workout playlist, and when it showed up, I felt like I could bench press the fucking universe. And on top of all this, it's worth noting that as per the norm with any Fit for an Autopsy record, the lyrics are pretty fucking fantastic. Here's my personal favorite segment from the track Pandora, the curse of coercion, two sides of a horrid mask, distorted dependence, loyalists to the falsest flags, wet work on the wasteland, whitewashing in the rubble. It's never too many graves, it's always not enough shovels. But as good as all of this is, I'm sorry folks, there are other tracks that just aren't up to par. They're not horrible, they're just not as exciting, and they feel somewhat derivative and underwhelming by comparison. Songs like Savages and In Shadows, for instance, just didn't really leave much of a mark, nor did Pandora musically. Lyrically, it's a great cut. Musically, I can live without it. But the worst offender is easily the album's lead single, Far From Heaven. Honest to God, it feels like a complete ripoff of Gojira's Another World, albeit with some chunkier deathcore barrages thrown into the mix. Fit for an Autopsy have not once shied away from their love of Gojira in the past, and I'm not really saying they should. But they should at the same time still write original songs, and Far From Heaven just doesn't really feel like that at all. Oh, What the Future Holds does end on a pretty effective note with the very bittersweet and evocative The Man That I Was Not, but I'm sure as you've noticed, the album was, for me, up until this point, somewhat inconsistent. A lot of gnarly bruisers and even some thought-provoking numbers, but also a few duds and a few, Far From Heavens. So I'm going to give this a very, very, very enthusiastic 3 out of 5. Had things been a little bit more consistent and in turn consistently creative and spicy, maybe I'd feel comfortable with a 3.5 out of 5. But for now, I think a very enthusiastic 3 out of 5 is more than fair. Contrary to what Iron Maiden and Spirit Box fanatics would have you believe. We need to remove the negative stigma of decent. It's not that bad of a score at all, folks. I have a feeling I'm going to be completely 100% in the minority on this. I can picture a lot of 4 out of 5s over the next weekend, a lot of 4.5 out of 5s, fans raving about how incredible the album is, it's an album of the year contender. More power to ya. If you love this album, I am so fucking happy for you. But there are some things here and there that prevent me from sharing that exact same enthusiasm. Nevertheless, I'm pretty proud of Fit for an Autopsy. They have advanced and progressed a lot as musicians, as human beings, and it shows on this album, warts and all. And I really wouldn't object to maybe picking this up on vinyl. Who knows, maybe in that format, Oh What the Future Holds will bloom like a flower in spring. Why not? Anything's possible. Weirder things have happened on this fucking channel. But for now, I still really don't think a very enthusiastic 3 out of 5 is very far out of line. It's decent, maybe a little overhyped, but still a pretty decent record, all things considered. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.